in a world that's very much trying to steal your attention away. We're starting to talk about having an attention crisis. We're starting to talk about how the general focus is starting to feel fragmented, and it becomes harder and harder to get something done while still staying at least somewhat sane as part of that process, right? So, like I said, my name is Susanne. I'm a software engineer. I've been working in the field of software for about 10 years now. I used to be a full-stack developer, primarily within the sort of .NET stack. I've also done some PHP along the way. These days, I do primarily back-end work, as well as various types of DevOps, automation, that kind of stuff. I also have ADHD, something I wasn't diagnosed with until a few years ago. So up until that point, I had to make it through, school, university, and the first good chunk of my career without, any medication to help me. So I had to get creative. I had to figure out how to work in a way that was sustainable in the long run. And I'm standing here today talking to you about productivity, but I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a coach, I'm not a neuroscientist, I don't have a PhD in anything, really. What I do have is years and years and years of trying to figure out how to function, how to get things done, how to work in a way where I could actually, ship some code without getting completely burned out along the way. Some of that wasn't always fun. Some of it was survival strategies. And that is what this talk is based on. It is not me having read all of the productivity tips out there or all the books which I am now going to summarize for you. This is more so a talk that contains all of the battle-tested strategies that I've sort of developed over the years that has turned out to be the most helpful, and that I've also shared with colleagues and friends over the years, where they've also said that this has made a good, positive influence on the way that they work today, even if they don't work in software. So we have a lot on the agenda for today. I have a lot of things I want to say, but generally we'll just take a small look into why is it that attention has become such a problem that we're now talking about an attention crisis. We're going to talk about sort of the basic toolkits, strategies around, time, energy, your general work environment. We're going to talk about various strategies to get started on large tasks or, any task sometimes. We're going to talk about procrastination, strategies to deal with that. And we're going to talk about what, for me, is the ultimate boss fight, which is meetings. It requires me to sit still and listen for prolonged periods of time, which I hate. And I even more hate it when it could just have been an email. But sometimes you have to survive those meetings anyway, preferably without being, completely tired or dazed when you get out of that meeting, right? So there are strategies for that. We're also going to talk about task tracking, how do you keep track of what you need to do without keeping a mental to-do list all the time that you sort of have to keep in your working memory. We're also going to talk about things like task prioritization, how do you do that? And then we're going to talk about something I am still struggling with today, which is managing my smartphone usage. And managing the amount of attention it sort of steals away from me. And finally, we'll wrap it all up. There might be time for questions towards the end. It depends on how fast I talk, so we'll see. But otherwise, if you have questions later on, feel free to come and find me. I'll be here today and tomorrow as well. So, why is it that we're starting to have problems with attention? It's not like we have sort of degenerated as human beings, right? So it's not really us that's the problem. It more so has to do with the way the world has evolved, right? If we compare now to 30 years ago or 40 years ago or 50 years ago, sort of the way the world was at the time was very much, protective of our focus and of our ability to stay attentive and listen and take information in. In many ways, we were sort of limited by, the way technology was at the time. And if we then fast forward to today, most of us are now in a sort of constant online state. We're always available. We always have our phone with us. I don't know that many people who go for a walk with their dog without having their phone with them. But if you were going for a walk in the 90s, you wouldn't have your phone with you. And the phone was for one thing, and that was talking. So it was fairly simple, right? We're also consuming huge amounts of information, right, in a speed that is the brain just has not evolved to be able to deal with. And so in that way, the environment, the world around us is really sort of rigged against us here. It's not really helpful in terms of, attention and focus and getting stuff done. So not a neuroscientist or whatever, but just briefly, the brain is a very complex thing. You can probably do talks on this alone, how the brain functions in terms of, attention and focus and whatnot, a day-long talk if you wanted to. But just sort of shortly, your brain really hasn't evolved really in the last however many thousand years, meaning that it's not really designed to deal with the way that we sort of use phones and things today. The primary sort of hardware in your brain that's involved here is the prefrontal cortex. That's sort of very often called the CEO of the brain, like the project manager. It is the part of your brain that's responsible for things like various executive functions, planning, impulse control, et cetera, et cetera. We have the anterior cingulate cortex, I think is pronounced that way, which is like the traffic controller. It handles various types of task switching. We have the striatum, that's the sort of wanting center. It's responsible for things like motivation. It provides you with dopamine, whenever you check little things off on your to-do list or whatever. And then we have the amygdala, which is the brain's sort of alarm system, which is really responsible for protecting you from various types of things that could potentially hurt you. And what can sometimes happen if you're in a very stressed state, especially if you are in that state for prolonged periods of time, is that the amygdala starts to take control from your prefrontal cortex. So you'll start losing impulse control. Your sort of decision-making will start to be somewhat questionable. Planning will also start feeling hard. Things like figuring out what the priority of tasks is can also become a problem. And so we tend to think about, focus and attention as something we should be able to switch on, poof, like some sort of magical button. But in reality, it has more to do with keeping this entire system in a somewhat balanced state most of the time. Because stress is natural, right? It happens. It's not like stress in its own necessarily is bad. It's more so that prolonged stress over prolonged periods of time can have that effect that you start losing sort of control, really. It feels a little bit like being hijacked in a way. Some of you have probably seen this graph before, many times, I'm sure. I think we have to talk about it anyway, because we tend to forget that all of these small interruptions we have during a day, whether it's during the workday or during our off hours, whenever we're doing something and we're in good flow or good focus mode and we get interrupted. It could be anything. It can be a coworker asking a question. It can be, an email notification, your mother-in-law giving you a call, who knows. The point is that we sort of keep thinking that we can get straight back into doing what we were doing before without any sort of cost. But there is a cost. It takes a while to sort of get back to what you were doing before. And it takes even longer if you were doing something complex where you've sort of now lost the entire mental model of it and now have to start rebuilding it. you've probably been in situations where, maybe you were debugging like some sort of complex production issue. So you have logs open here and there, and you have some dashboards, and you've sort of started to get some sort of idea of what the problem is. There's something with an ID, and there's something over here, and so we have an hypothesis or two now, right? Then something happens. Maybe your boss comes in and says, what's the status on the fire that's burning? And so you reply, and 5 minutes pass, and then you go back to doing what you were doing before. At that point, your brain has done 2 task switches, which is fairly, resource heavy for the brain to do. And I mean resource heavy quite literally in terms of, oxygen, glucose, that kind of stuff. So at this point, you've sort of lost most of that mental model you might have spent like an hour building. So you might still remember there was something about an ID and things, but in reality, your brain now has to start building that model one more time. Maybe not from scratch, but not from where it was the moment you let it go, right? And obviously, there is no talking about productivity without, addressing the elephant in the room, which is AI. AI in many ways promises to, supercharge your output. And in some ways it does, right? It produces 10 times more code, 10 times more text, 10 times more everything. And it all seems very, productive and efficient, and look at all the stuff we're getting done now. The problem with all of the stuff that AI generates is that at some point, you, as the human, now need to look at it. You have to read it, you have to validate it, you have to understand it. Maybe you also have to fix it. Maybe you have to do a reprompt and then trigger that process one more time. And that gives an incredible amount of cognitive load that nobody's really talking about. Like, that is hard for the brain to do. And it is hard to do it a lot continuously throughout the day. What we're starting to see more and more, and I'm guilty of this myself, is to have not just one agent, but multiple working at 8 or 9 or 10 different things at the same time. And you feel very productive, right, as you sort of switch between them and yay, it's going and all is great. But all of that context switching is incredibly hard for the brain. It is what makes you feel like completely foggy in your head after a work day. It's all of that context switching, which is, difficult not to do because it seems like everybody else is doing it, so we must do it too. And if you add to that the expectations with AI is also just rising and rising and rising, right? The moment people hear that AI will make everybody work, more efficient and faster and all of that, all of a sudden you have a situation where, the expectations to you as a developer also goes up. So now you're also expected to deliver 10 times more, do it 10 times faster, and maybe with 10 times as few resources as you had before. And if you add all of that together, that is how you end up with AI burnout, which is a thing now, like an actual thing that we're now talking about. So what do we do about that? We can't change the world, right? We can't roll back 10 or 20 or 30 years of technological process. Like, that is not within our power to do. So what we need to do is to find ways of working where we can still get things done, we can utilize the technology that we have, and still remain somewhat sane and not burn out completely in the process, right? So let's move into what is sort of the basic toolkit. And we'll start with something that is related to the most important thing you have as a human now, which is your attention, which is your focus. And this is your most valuable commodity, and you need to protect it. And a very simple, straightforward way to do that is to do some sort of time blocking or time management. And you can do this in any way you like, to any extent you like. It depends on you, whatever your preferences are. Typically, I found that a good place to start is to maybe set off an hour and a half, 3 times a week, if you can, for like focused deep work. If you can get like maybe your whole team on board with it, that's even better. But if you just yourself like voice that you would try to do this and see if it helps in terms of productivity, then usually people are understandable. Like they understand that you're trying to sort of protect your own focus here. I also tend to do it for code reviews. Code reviews is like an ever ongoing discussion, right? Because we don't want people to be blocked from getting their stuff done for like days and days and days. But we also don't want to be like interrupted every time somebody needs code reviewed. So it has to be some sort of balance, right? I've done some trial and error with this, and I've found that the first thing in the morning, I typically set off half an hour to an hour, depending on how much I have and how big they are. And then the first thing after lunch, because that means nobody is blocked for too long, and I can still have time to do like some deep focus work, both before lunch, but also after lunch. Sometimes I'll also do it towards the end of the day, sort of depending on the inflow of pull requests, so that I have dedicated time to it, meaning that I can, in good conscience, ignore any pull request reviews that I'm getting during focus hours, because I know I'll get to it sort of fairly soon, right? Again, you can adapt this to suit your needs. If what you need is an hour at the end of every day to, I don't know, catch up on various things or review your notes or whatever, it's fine, you do you. The point is to try and protect that focus time as much as possible. One other incredibly useful habit I've picked up is what I call the ramp in and ramp out technique. It's also sometimes called like warm up and cool down. And it is about making the switches between different types of working as easy as possible for your brain to do. I tend to do it at the beginning of the workday as a sort of, we're now getting into work, getting sort of ramped up to get some actual work done. And when the workday ends, you sort of want to do the same, so you get sort of a smooth exit out of your sort of work mode. I also do it before and after meetings. Meetings tend to be, something that can kill my focus pretty fast. I hate them. So I try to make it as easy for myself to both switch into sort of meeting mode, but also to switch out of it. And, it involves various things. Like before a meeting, I might, read the agenda, skim any relevant documents, or maybe I'll just go get coffee and stare out the window for 10 minutes. It doesn't really matter. The point is that you need some sort of time to adjust to the new mode that you're going into. You can apply this to all kinds of things, really, depending on where you feel like the need is the greatest. Typically, workday and meetings is where the need is for me. This is screenshots from my actual calendar. I've had to block things out because there are some things I'm not allowed to show you. But as you can see here, there are some days where, for example, I will have back-to-back meetings where, there's no time for ramp in and ramp out. And, it is what it is. I just have to, deal with it in some sort of way. But generally, I will block at least the focus time in my calendar. The ramp in and ramp out at this point now is like habit. So I don't need it blocked out in my calendar exactly. But I did used to do this in the beginning for the first 6 months to a year or so. It makes it visible, not just to you, but to everybody else that, okay, this is focus time, so maybe, my question can wait half an hour. Typically, people are really nice about it. Like, they will respect it if they can. And I also don't treat them as 100% non-negotiable, as in, obviously, if there are no pull requests to review, I won't just sit around for half an hour, like staring at my screen, you know what I mean? Or if, there is some sort of production issue and I can be helpful, then I'll like shove the focus time out the window and plan it for another day. So I have to adjust, right? Because this is something I'm more or less the only one that does. So the rest of the organization and the rest of the team are not like on the same boat here. So I sort of had to adjust to them as well. Moving on to energy management. One thing is to manage your time. Another one is to manage your energy. And for that, I found the traffic light method to be extremely useful. Like, the concept here is that you want to keep recharging your battery, not keep draining it until you have nothing left to give. That is how you end up with burnout if you do that enough over prolonged periods of time. The idea here is that you start out for 1 or 2 weeks by logging everything you do during a day, and you put it into one of these 3 categories, depending on whether, did this feel energizing? Like, was it fun? Or was it energy neutral? Like, nah, it was all right. Or was it like a draining task? Was it something you felt like it was sucking the life out of you? And once those 2 or 3 weeks have passed, or 1 week, whatever you feel is enough to get started, you take a look at your results. And you try to see if you can do anything to get somewhere around, this is like the general sort of area where you want to be. So around 10 to 20% red tasks at most. Sometimes you can do something about it, sometimes you can't. If you can't do anything about the tasks themselves, maybe you can try and put in, like, see if you can do some green things in between the red ones to sort of keep the balance a little. Or the beauty of this is that it will also work if you do this for what you do outside of work too. So if you have periods of time where there is a lot of red tasks work-wise and you can't do anything about it, you can balance it with what will give you energy outside of work as well. And you can review this every now and then if you feel like it. Sometimes our preferences change, right? I've included some examples of what might be green tasks, but this is really up to you as a person, what you think is energizing and what is not. So your physical work environment also matters. And I have AI generated this because I felt kind of bad, outing someone's messy desk, on a conference. I didn't feel like that was fair. My desk used to look like this years ago, but I have a sort of very minimal setup now. So this is AI generated. I didn't want to out anyone. But you can probably visually see the difference here. If you have a lot of visual clutter, around the area that you work, it tends to pull at your attention, even if you're not really noticing it. I'm not telling you to become desk minimalists overnight. Maybe it's more so about reducing it a little to the point where it's not as noisy. This is quite something, right? Another thing is to try and create a work-only zone. If you're one of those people that go into the office every day, this sort of comes natural, right? You know that when you get into work, this is now work time. If you, like me, tend to work a lot from home, falling into the couch trap, which is work, where you also, relax and watch movies and whatever it is you do, it becomes harder for your brain to sort of discern when is work time and when is free time. The optimal is, of course, if you could have a separate room, but if that is not possible, it can be as simple as having a desk, and that desk is then only for work. Anything else you do can be done somewhere else. It sort of helps the brain knowing, oh, I am now transitioning physically into work mode, and the same when you go out of it. Also, in the cases where maybe visual clutter is not your problem, maybe it more so has to do with noise. Try to find ways around that. Noise-canceling headphones are great. If you are so unfortunate to have a desk at your office where people are walking back and forth in front of it, maybe you can see if you can get a screen or whatever. You know what I mean? Try to physically make your work environment work for you instead of against you, if you can. Sometimes, there's nothing that can be done about it, and it is what it is, right? So, I'm one of those people who has a lot of browser windows open and a lot of tabs open. And this is only one browser window, and that's not even as bad as it has been previously. The problem with that is that I would open so many tabs, I would sort of forget where I had opened what. So if I had been looking at some documentation 10 minutes ago, and I was like, oh wait, there was something in that documentation about this, I'm sure. It will then take me 10 minutes to find that documentation again, and by that time I'll have forgotten why I was even looking for it, which is, kind of sad, but also the reality, right? So I sort of came up with 2 rules that I try to adhere to as much as possible, which is if you do not need it, close it. Seriously, just close the tab and move on with your life, right? If you do need it, you either bookmark it or you add it to like a tab group. Most browsers have the concept of tab groups. Sometimes it'll be called things like tab stacks or tab islands, whatever, it doesn't really matter. The point is, as I hope can sort of be seen here, that it sort of creates a visual structure where, let's say I'm working on one thing, then there is a production issue and now I have to help with that. I can sort of fold my tab group away and all the tabs will still be there when I need them afterwards. But I can now sort of have the only sort of visual tabs being the ones that I actually need for what I'm doing right now. And I use Google Chrome mostly, and Chrome will also remember these different tab groups between sessions. So if you shut your laptop down, you will still have your tab groups whenever you open them the next time. It could also be you need other various types of ways to deal with this, but like the sort of visual where you can also see that the different colors and things is actually really helpful, I think. So sometimes getting started on a task, even if it's a small one, can be a little difficult. Maybe sometimes we're tired. Sometimes we just don't really know where to start. And that is what these strategies are for. One of them is called Eat the Frog. It's a very common tactic. I've heard a lot of people use it. It's quite useful, actually. Most of the time, this is a great working strategy. The concept here is that when you start your workday, you will try and identify whatever seems to be like the largest or the hardest or whatever task you sort of dread the most. And that is the one you will do first. So that the energy that you tend to have the most of in the beginning of the day will then be used on something that is hard. So that instead of doing it at the end of the day where your sort of mental batteries are starting to be drained, you want to start working on it first. Also feels really good when you get it out of the way, right? Sometimes you might also realize that your frog task is, a multi-day or multi-week type of thing, in which case maybe the frog task is to make that frog into smaller frogs. You know what I mean? Do some task breakdown until it gets to a point where it becomes more manageable. That can be a frog task on its own. It also protects against what is called planning fallacy. We have a tendency to underestimate how long things take, even though we've done them before. So even though we have cleaned the oven at our home 200 and God knows how many times before, we still underestimate how long it takes because reasons. So by starting with the hard thing, it also means that the rest of your day doesn't necessarily go out the window if this ends up taking a little longer than you expected, right? This tactic, the snowball method, is really useful if you get into work and you find your frog task and you look at it and you just can't really, get going on it. In which case, you just need to stop looking at it and go find a couple of simple, easy things to do. Because getting those little small wins, like those little check marks off your to-do list, is like a little motivation booster. It creates momentum, and then you can use that momentum to sort of carry you into the harder tasks. So it helps you in a way to get started, and then you can use that energy to propel you forward. This tactic is also really useful if, starting feels completely impossible. What you want to do is you want to set a timer for 5 minutes, and you want to tell yourself, I can do this for 5 minutes. It's just 5 minutes. Of course I can do that. And what typically ends up happening is that once you've started, it becomes so much easier to keep going that all of a sudden it's not a problem anymore. One example is from when I started working on this PowerPoint. It seems like a quite large task. It takes a while to create something like this. So what I did was I set a timer for 2 hours on a Sunday where I had no other plans. So 2 hours felt like a manageable amount of time. It can be 5 minutes, it can be 10, it can be 1 hour, it doesn't really matter. It just needs to be manageable. And so what happened was that I ended up spending 5 hours that day working on the PowerPoint because I got into a really good flow mode, which is where you want to be. And that is what this can help you with. Because typically getting started is the hard part. It's not the, continue working. That is the problem. let's talk a little bit about procrastination. I'm very good at procrastinating. I, at one point, identified myself as a semi-professional procrastinator. I would do anything except what I was supposed to be doing, which sometimes is fine, and other times not so fine. So I tried to figure out how to deal with that. Now, procrastination is also something you can have entire talks on, that topic alone, right? We typically think of procrastination as being something related to laziness or lack of discipline or lack of willpower. But in reality, this is also your brain's biology that is at play here. So procrastination typically happens because your brain is trying to protect you from something it perceives as being like emotionally discomfortable in some sort of way, whether that is fear of failure or because the task is boring, or because you're overwhelmed because the task requires 32 gigabytes of RAM and your mental memory only has 16 left, so you're like, no thank you. There can be many reasons for this. It can also be dealt with in different ways. One of them is to make whatever it is you do to procrastinate as hard as possible to do, because procrastination also has a lot to do with habit. So you, over time, evolve a habit of procrastinating, so to avoid the discomfort rather than just, get going with what you're supposed to do. This can look different depending on what your problem is, right? Let's say that your favorite procrastination method is color sorting your Legos in your office at home, right? If that's the case, maybe what you want to do is to move the Lego out of the office, to make it physically more difficult to get to the Legos. Or someone like me who used to browse different websites endlessly. This used to be my favorite procrastination method. I would check things like the GitHub changelog, random developer blogs, the news, LinkedIn, and some of it even felt somewhat productive, like, ooh, I'm just keeping tabs on things here. But in reality, what I was doing was really procrastinating. And so naturally, I started out thinking, oh, I just need to, grow a spine, pull myself together. I can just stop doing this, right? No. I can say that did not work in any way, shape, or form whatsoever. So if I do not have the willpower to stop myself from doing it, maybe what I need is something that can stop me from doing it, which is where website blockers come into the picture, right? Cold Turkey is my absolute favorite for this. It is very simple, easy to install, works across multiple browsers, works in incognito mode. And now, I think it's been 4 years-ish since I installed it the first time. And I have had some sort of website blocker installed since, up until 2 months ago, where I thought, as a part of preparing for this talk, I figured, what happens if I turn off the website blocker now? Because now I don't procrastinate by going to these websites anymore. But will I fall back into the same habit if I'm sort of allowed to do this again? So it's been turned off for 2 months, and not once have I felt like the urge, the need to go and procrastinate by checking various news sites. So I've sort of gotten rid of that habit over time by preventing myself from doing it. Sometimes that is not possible. And in that case, maybe what you want to do is to try to make whatever you're sort of trying to avoid doing as comfortable or as enjoyable as possible. Like, it can be anything here, really. Be a little creative about it. Maybe it can be putting on your favorite music, making like a nice snack, creating your favorite drink. You can try and gamify it a little in different ways. It's really up to you. Most important is that any progress you make on that task, you need to celebrate it, even if it's just like opening the code base in your editor. It's still progress. It's still better than where you were before, right? Which leads me into this strategy, which is really about reframing how you think about tasks. Because we tend to think things inside our head, even though we're not entirely aware of it, things like, ugh, this is going to be so boring. I don't want to do it. This code base is a mess. I don't even know what this is. I don't want to. I hate it. It's boring, blah, blah, blah. And whenever we do this, we just sort of reinforcing the feeling that this will be like tiresome and annoying, and even your sort of amygdala will also start upping like the amount of cortisol it releases into your brain, which we now know will eventually over time take sort of control away from the CEO of your brain, right? So we don't want that to happen. What you can then try and do, and this is difficult because this is about changing how you think, what you can then do is to try to rephrase it, like the example here. This review will sharpen my review skills and it will unblock my teammate. This is good. It's going to be good. This will be fun, right? Try and, lie to yourself a little if you must. It doesn't really matter. The point is that if you do this enough over time, your brain will sort of adapt to this new way of thinking. So the sort of neural pathways will start to be reinforced so that eventually, like the positive framing of tasks now becomes the default, which makes tasks in general a lot easier to start and a lot more fun to do if you don't hate them before you've even started. So, the meetings. Those meetings that somehow always turns into more, and somehow you have to be in all of them, and half of them could have been an email, right? There are different ways of dealing with this. The goal here is not so much to necessarily remember everything that was being said or whatever. It is more so to not feel completely drained when you go out of the meetings. And there are different strategies for that. One very obvious one is that you can try and reduce distractions as much as possible. So if you don't need your phone, don't bring it with you into the meeting room. If you don't need your laptop, don't bring that one either. It really depends on whether or not that's possible. Maybe you write notes on your laptop. If that's the case, that's fine, right? Then what you want to try and do is to keep your brain in sort of an active listening mode. Because what happens if you just passively sit and listen for prolonged periods of time is that your brain will sort of start, go off onto autopilot. It'll start thinking about the grocery list, or, you'll start daydreaming about, pancakes or whatever, right? Maybe what you want to do instead is to try and stay present in the meeting. And different ways of doing that can be, for example, you can try and ask questions, not bombard the poor meeting people with questions, but questions every now and then means that your brain has to process and then form some sort of question, which keeps you in active listening mode. You can also try and take active notes. You can do it by hand or you can do it by laptop. It doesn't really matter. The point is, if you take active notes, especially if you do it with your own words, you also keep your brain active and engaged. This is usually what I do. I take a lot of notes by hand. And you don't have to look at these notes ever again, because that's not the purpose. The purpose of the notes in this case is to keep you somewhat attentive so you don't feel tired and drained when you get out of the meeting. Also has the added benefit that if you, like me, get a million ton of ideas all the time, you can also just jot down those down in the edges of your notebook, and they're out of your head. So don't have to circle around in there forever. Sometimes we don't really feel like taking notes. In those cases, you can try and gamify it a little. I used to do this for a while. I would draw little stars in my notebook every time somebody said things like agile or review time was also a hot topic at some point. And it sounds ridiculous. It's actually kind of fun. You can even make a competition out of it, within your team, see who sits in the most agile meetings, right? Don't tell your manager. But it can be quite fun, and suddenly it turns what could have been a boring meeting into a sort of half game, kinda. And finally, you can try to sort of keep your hands busy or keep yourself moving around. If I can get away with it, I like to stand and move during meetings. Sometimes that's not possible, in which case I take notes by hand. Or you can use fidget toys, or you can doodle, or you can, knit, if that is what you want to do, it doesn't really matter. The point is that keeping your hands busy or keeping your body moving in some sort of way also helps keep your brain sort of on track. So that when you get out on the other side of the meeting, it doesn't feel like you wasted your entire life in a useless meeting where you maybe even shouldn't have been in the first place, because it could have been an email, as they usually can. So now that we have, time management under control, we're somewhat focused in meetings to some extent. We have our energy management under control. How do we keep track of what we need to do? And this is such a simple thing, but seriously, it makes a huge difference. Because if you're not putting your to-do list onto paper or onto a digital tool or whatever, you sort of have to mentally keep track of it all the time, which is something your brain then has to spend resources on. And given that our attention and brain power is now our most protected resource, maybe that's not what we wanted to spend its energy on. You can do this with a piece of paper. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It can be a page in OneNote. Do it in Excel for all I care, if that's what works for you. There are various tools for it as well. I really like Todoist. Very simple, very easy to get started with. My favorite right now is ClickUp. It has a lot of sort of automated stuff, like you can make recurring tasks. So if there's something you need to do every Monday or whatever, the task will sort of automatically come back. Also has some nice sort of visual boards where you can move things around and such. Another thing that can be very difficult if you have ADHD is prioritizing things. This can also be difficult if you have been in a stressed state for a while. That's where your prefrontal cortex starts to lose control. And so figuring out what is the most important thing can be hard. Or if you work in the type of work environment that has a sort of busy culture where we're all so busy all the time, everything is super important and it all needs to be done right now. Everything is urgent. In which case, figuring out what you really need to be doing can be a little tricky sometimes. For that, I use a prioritization matrix. This is the Eisenhower prioritization matrix. And what this forces you to do is to look at the task in comparison to the other tasks. Is this task more important than this one? Yes or no? Is this more urgent than this one? Yes or no? And so you can visually place them depending on how urgent they are. Also frees up, resources in your head, because your brain will try to do this constantly, even if you're not entirely aware of it. So this also frees it up. It makes it visible what it is you need to do. And if you visit this enough, I do this every day, both for my private life and for work, your brain will start to understand this process, and eventually it'll start happening all on its own. So this will be difficult at first sometimes, but it'll be easier, I promise. It also means that whenever you can take something off because you've now done it, you also get a nice little green check mark, which we like. Yes?
With delegation, if you delegate things that are not important but urgent, what does that just train whoever you're delegating to?
Yeah. So sometimes tasks are given to you that shouldn't have been given to you. Or sometimes you are given tasks and you're I have time to do this in 3 months, so do you want it done now? Or in which case you maybe need to have a conversation to people and say, okay, we need to delegate it to someone else. An example from my private life would be, so I work a full-time job. Besides doing this, all of this preparation for things like this happens in my free time, on evenings, in weekends, things like that. I even use my vacation days for going here. So with a limited amount of free time, and I also have a partner that works full-time, more than full-time sometimes, things like cleaning is something that, is not really prioritized, and so we delegated it. So we hired a cleaning lady. We delegated it to someone else. Sometimes you also have tasks where, maybe you shouldn't be doing this anymore. Maybe you don't need to be doing this. And also, I will say, you can adjust this. So my one from home has 6 squares instead of 4, because sometimes I will have things in sort of waiting position, they will wait for a reply from someone, or for example, I am the Toastmaster at a friend's wedding, in August. So I have a lot of like things related to that is sort of waiting for someone to reply or send me something or whatever. So that sort of has its own square, the waiting for other people square. So you can adjust this as well to whatever you feel like. So I have a very complicated relationship with my phone. I realized that I need to have it right. So I'm from Denmark, where a lot of things are digital now. A lot of our IDs are digital. Like our health identification card is now also almost exclusively digital. So I need it, right? I just don't like how much it pulls at my attention constantly. And so I like to call it a weapon of mass distraction, because that is very much how I feel about it. It's, I hate it, but I also love it. Like I love my audiobook app, for example. I would be very sad without it. Again, you could have entire talks on this topic alone, right? What is it about phones that makes them so hard to ignore? And the matter of the fact is that they pull on a lot of like things on a neurobiological level that makes them incredibly hard to resist. Like, again, this is not discipline. It's not like lack of willpower. It's not a case of you just need to grow a spine and stop looking at it. That's not how it works. And this is even more so when you have ADHD and have issues with impulse control already. This is an issue, right? One of the reasons is what I call the magical maybe. It is that your brain will quickly realize that notifications and things on a phone don't sort of come on like a regular schedule. They can't really be predicted. And so it sort of keeps looking for it because our brains are sort of built to look for cues for things that can potentially lead to rewards. And notifications are like rewards for our brain, or unfortunately, apps, social media, etc. They're designed this way on purpose. They're made to do this to you. They're made to turn what is originally, a conscious choice to pick up your phone and check notification. They are designed to turn this into a habit that happens repeatedly and often. It's just not very good for your sort of general focus and, well-being. So there are different ways you can deal with this. One of them is to remove either all notifications or as many notifications as you can. And you need to be ruthless here. We tend to think that Slack notifications, emails, whatever, are super important. But are they really? Like, will the world end if you don't reply to this email like in the next 2 hours? Probably not, right? And if that's the case, then you probably don't need to be notified about it. The same goes for things like Discord, for example. Like, is it important to answer your friend on Discord? Sure. Maybe you don't need to do it the minute you get the notification. So what you can do instead is to turn off the notifications and then turn like the checking to see if there are things you need to reply to into something you actively choose to do instead of something you're pulled into doing, which means that you take control back, and it feels a lot less like hijacking if you do it this way. It becomes more controlled. Another tactic is to remove it physically from the situations where you find it's too distracting, whether that is at work or at bedtime or whatever. So it is about 5 years ago or so, I started realizing that I had a serious problem with my phone. And again, I tried using sheer willpower and got absolutely nowhere. So I spent some time thinking about it and started to get the feeling that what I needed was to have some sort of reset in a way. So I went and I bought a box and I bought like a timer padlock that you can then set for like 5-10 minutes or whatever. And I decided to set it for 1 hour. So every night, every evening, I would have 1 hour, not just of phone-free time, but screen-free time. So I also logged the laptop, the tablets, the PlayStation controllers, and the remote control into the box. much to my partner's annoyance, but he didn't really get a say in that, and he did actually end up saying that it was kind of nice after about a month. But, because I mean, I can't be right. Surely I can't be right. Anyway, so I had this thought that I would then use that hour to, read a book. Maybe I would go for a walk. Maybe I would do various sort of creative things, right? Spend that time to sort of wind down. But the first week was horrible. Like, that is the most physical discomfort I've ever felt, I think. Like, physically, I didn't feel like I could fit in my own body. Like, I wasn't able to just sit and do anything. I was sort of, my partner says it was a bit like watching sort of a lost ghost, sort of just drifting around. Like, I wasn't really doing anything. And I kept sort of hovering around where the box was. I kept walking into that room and be like, why am I in here? I'm not supposed to be in here. It got better. Like, the first week was hard. Like, I almost gave up on day 3, thinking this is horrible. So clearly I had a problem, right? I just didn't think it was that bad. But it got better. And over time, I'm now sort of at a point where occasionally I might start locking the phone. It's the phone that's the problem for me, right? I will start locking the phone in again if I start getting the feeling that I'm being hijacked a little. That's what it feels like to me. But most of the time, I can now just put it down, like on the kitchen counter, and go into the living room and read a book. And it's not a problem, which is very nice. Yes? Yes.
So what is your call, right?
Mm-hmm.
Inside your telephone.
Yes.
What to do with that?
I'll tell you. Introducing app blockers or apps that can create friction for you. There are apps out there that can solve exactly your problem, which is you might want to spend some time, just not too much time. This is screenshots from my own phone. My problem has never really been social media. It has more so been excessive amounts of Googling. Like, I will Google one thing, it'll lead me to Google 10 other things, and suddenly I've spent hours and hours and hours researching stuff I didn't really need to know. Like, it can really take off to a point where I can't really stop it. And, all of the idea generating is fine, just not for 2 hours, right? I've tried various apps over time, various apps that will also sort of block usage completely. But sometimes I do want to open my Chrome app, right? Maybe I have to, log into my, bank account or whatever, right? Like, sometimes it has legitimate usage, right? In those cases, this app, OneSec, has been incredibly useful. So I've had it installed for, that was mid-December, so about 6 months. And when I started this, I thought I had sort of somewhat control of my Chrome usage. But the statistics don't lie. I was spending, on average, 3 hours a day, just in the Chrome app alone. And I was sort of attempting to open it more than 100 times a day. Try and calculate how many times per hour on average that is. Like, that is stupid. Why am I doing this? Imagine what I could do with 3 hours of work instead, right? So I set, this is sort of a configurable app, right? So when you open the apps you put under OneSec control, it will tell you to take a deep breath or whatever it is you feel like that can be configured. It will force me to wait 8 seconds. Then it will ask me, do you want to open this app or not? Most of the time, the answer is no, because it's sort of an impulse that I couldn't really, stop myself from doing sometimes. Or I just got really excited about an idea and really wanted to do some Googling, only to realize that maybe that can wait. You know what I mean? And the beauty of this one is that if you say, yes, I do want to open this app, you're also forced to make a conscious decision about how long you want to spend on it. The maximum is 15 minutes. You can set it to 5. It doesn't really matter, right? Just be somewhat realistic. So it also stops the excessive Googling or the doom Googling that I tend to do, so that even if I fall into the doom Googling trap, it will stop me. So after the 15 minutes, it will re-prompt me again, force me to wait 8 seconds and say, do you want to continue to do this? and I'll be forced to make the same choices again. And it'll also give you statistic reports. So now that it has been 6 months, my average usage per week is down to around 1 hour, a little bit less than 1 hour now. And my attempts to use, to sort of open this app is now down to somewhere between 35 and 40 on average. So I've just gained 2 hours of time in a day on average, which is crazy, right? Also relates to things as this, which is to get the phone like physically out of, for example, the bedroom, meaning that that time I was now, like before, used to randomly Googling shit before I went to sleep, I now spend reading, for example. Yes?
Does introducing friction when you're trying to open an app or whatever make you not want to put it away normally when you would have? Because you're like, now it's going to be so much harder to get.
Yes, it does actually help. So I don't need to put it away as much because this shit annoys me. Like, sometimes it'll say, it's time to take a deep breath, and I'll be like, I'll show you how to take a deep breath, you little fucking... And I'll just put it away out of sheer annoyance, right? You can customize that text, by the way. I just kept it because taking deep breaths is good, right? It's good for us, we need it. But sometimes I just kind of want to throw the fucking app out the window. But I don't, because I have to admit it works. It really does. And you might have to do some experimenting on like what level you want, like in terms of friction, right? So I'm sort of running out of time, so I'll just sort of speed this up a little. We have to, go get some food, and there's a party and things, so let's get going. When you get started trying to sort of consciously take control of your time and take your focus back, it's hard, it's difficult. So eventually you will fail. It's part of the process. You have to try things, and to figure out what works for you, you also need to fail. So don't expect like perfection from day one. Don't expect like all of this to work from day one. Just try to be experimental about it. And eventually you will sort of start feeling like you're getting some level of control back. Not everything works for everyone, which is fine. It's also really important to say that we tend to look at everybody else and assume that they are 100% focused and delivers 100% performance every single day. They don't. We're human beings. We're not robots, at least not yet. So we become affected by life, by the things around us. Like if your kids have woken you up every night, like 5 times for 3 weeks, you're sleep deprived, like crazy. And so there is no amount of like productivity apps that can like make up for that lack of sleep, and it's fine. Like nobody else is delivering the same like level of focus and performance every single day. We're human beings, not robots, yet. If you take anything away from all of this, it is to try and take the problem-solving skills that makes you developers, that makes you engineers, and apply them to your own life. Like hack the shit out of your own life, right? If you want to change things, try to be creative about it. Figure out ways to solve the problems that you have. One example from my own life is I hate exercise. I find it boring. I hate it. Exercise for the sake of exercise never really did it for me. So I've tried all kinds of things throughout the years, never really stuck with anything. And we all know that exercise is good for us. It helps with focus. It helps you sleep better, yada, yada, yada. So at some point, I figured maybe what I needed to do was to combine exercise with something I already really enjoyed doing, such as gaming. So I did some pondering on that. I was considering whether I should get like the PlayStation VR headset, for example, like try some of that. But eventually, because all I really like to play ever since it came out is Diablo 4. It's really all I play now. So I figured, okay, I need to find a way where I can play Diablo 4, in a safe manner and do exercise at the same time. So I went and I bought an exercise bike, one of those that you can sort of fold and like put into a closet if you don't want to look at it every day. And now I'm getting more exercise done than I ever have on a consistent basis. Like it has been 4 or 5 times a week for 2 years. And I can feel it like my body feels better. I sleep better at night. In general, this has been an improvement in every sort of way, right? That also gave me other problems to solve, such as if you exercise while gaming, you get sweaty hands. So you drop the controller. And after I killed 2 controllers that way, I thought, okay, maybe I need to get some sort of like gloves or something to sort of help me not drop the controller. You know what I mean? The point here is try to be creative in terms of solving the problems or the things you want to change. Try to figure out what can be done. What can I do about this? And be inventive. Figure out new things. Try things out. Maybe they don't work, but that's fine. You can try out something else, right? And finally, we all know that life is meant to be lived, right? You're not meant to optimize and be productive every single hour of every single day, because you also need to, call your friends and family. You need to, do the things that you enjoy doing, the things that will energize you. And whether that is, organizing your pen collection or building Legos or whatever, just make sure there's time for this as well. Like, don't try to optimize, like, everything. It doesn't have to be optimized. Not everything has to be optimized. We're a little bit over time, so questions you'll have to come after. I have a QR code here for feedback, which I would very much appreciate. There's also the usual feedback balls outside. I also have a QR code for LinkedIn. Feel free to connect to me there. If you try any of these, let me know how it went. If you come up with new, exciting ways to solve problems, I'd love to hear about that too. With that is the end of it. Thank you so much for being here and listening to me rant.